For those of you who have travelled far and sat through the day, well done for still being awake, and please stay with us for what's going to be a fascinating final and hopefully full of hope closing panel. The title of this closing panel is called Think Globally, Act Local, and we've got three great speakers. We've got I actually know everyone, I'm just slightly nervous, so you just want to make sure that you don't do anything horrifically wrong at the last minute. So Sara Medi Jones, who's the Acting General Secretary of CND UK. We've got Jonathan Bartley, who's co-leader of the Green Party, and Nobu Onu, who is SOAS CND Student Society. I'm Hannah, and I'm the Vice Chair of London CND. So this panel today, everyone's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. I just want to say that we've had a whole range of really fascinating talks today. I've learned absolutely loads. A bit of it went over my head, in all honesty, but that's why I'm here, to keep learning. So this closing panel, we wanted to talk about what can we do. As some of you know, there's been a huge protest out on the streets today, organised by the People's Assembly against austerity. I went on the Iraq War March when I was 15. We've got some younger members here today. And sometimes it feels like we've been on many marches, and what's happening? Do we need to keep marching? Will we be going on demos every weekend? Because I feel like I am. What more can we do? And what's happening at the moment? What new tools and strategies can we utilise? It would also be nice to talk a little bit about what we're going to be focusing on over the coming year. During our AGM this morning, the London region decided on some of our priorities for kind of areas of focus for us this year, which included supporting our new peace networks, which we've just set up in East London, in Croydon and in West London. If you're in any of those areas, please do join some of those networks to see how you can get involved. We're also going to be trying to expand our events around Hiroshima and Nagasaki days to commemorate those events there. And we're going to be, as we've spoken about several times, I think we've really done quite a lot of plugs on this, we're going to be touring a speaker from South Korea and focusing quite a lot on political education and public events. So enough from me. I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, which is going to be Sara.
Thank you. So first I'd like to say, First I'd like to say a big thank you to London CND for inviting me to speak here today and for arranging what sounds like a very worthwhile conference. I was asked to speak, as Hannah mentioned, about nuclear disarmament priorities for 2019. So in this 10 minutes that I have, I will outline the issues that CND is expected to focus on this year. As some of you may be aware, CND has just commemorated our 60th anniversary year. When we were set up back in 1958, it's fair to say that it was moral opposition to nuclear weapons that motivated most of our supporters. And indeed, this moral objection is relevant as ever. I was taking part in a school session recently where we asked the students to talk about what they thought about nuclear weapons. And there was a lot of different views. And then suddenly a 16-year-old boy stood up and said, "Hang on," he said, "are we really comfortable that our government has a weapon that can do the damage we saw in Hiroshima?" Now, sadly, not all the population is as wise as that student. So our campaigning has to continue until we achieve that world without nuclear weapons. As I'm sure most of us, if not all of us in this room agrees, Britain should scrap its current nuclear weapon system, Trident, and cancel the plans for a replacement. And over the past few years, it's our campaign against the cost of Trident that has resonated the most with the general public completely fed up with cuts to public services. A new nuclear weapon system will end up costing at least £205 billion over its lifetime. The question's already been asked, but if we have billions to spend on these weapons of mass destruction, why don't we have enough money to build homes, provide free education, pay doctors and nurses a decent wage? And there I just said at least £205 billion. That's CND's current estimate. But looking back at the past year, we've had announcement after announcement of more money being allocated for building new nuclear weapons, for reports showing black holes in the defence budgets more generally. Who knows what that final total could be? And to compound matters, Trident doesn't even keep us safe. In terms of national security, nuclear weapons are frankly irrelevant. According to the government's own national security strategy, a nuclear threat is not a Tier 1 priority. Instead, the real problems we face are sensibly identified as terrorism, cyber warfare, pandemics, and climate change. In fact, our nuclear weapons are becoming more and more of a security liability. Escalating costs and mounting safety concerns have shown that not only does Trident fail to protect us from real security threats, but the replacement system could be endangering us. Now, I'm not saying nuclear weapons have ever been safe, but in recent months there has been a particularly high number of incidents. Some of you may have heard that a Trident missile test backfired just before a big vote in Parliament in 2016, but that was covered up in case it affected the outcome. Last year, the Office for Nuclear Regulation demanded urgent changes in the factory that makes Britain's nuclear bombs. Also, we've heard of faulty missile tubes. We've heard there's a problem with refuelling some of the submarines. And just last week, we heard that a submarine came back to shore damaged. The very part of the submarine meant to escape from detection was damaged. We really are walking into who knows with the future of these submarines. Most of the world is ahead of us in opposing nuclear weapons, of course. After years of campaigning for a global ban, CND was thrilled in 2017 when 122 countries voted in favour of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or as we most often call it, the global ban. This agreement could truly make the world a more peaceful place when it enters into force. But the British government, true to form, has just attacked the treaty. But there is something that we can all in this room do now and that people across the country can do. Towns and cities across the world are becoming global ban communities as they get their local councils to sign up to support the treaty. Manchester became the first city in Europe to officially support the treaty after Manchester City Council unanimously passed a resolution in support. Renfrewshire Council followed soon after. And wouldn't it be fantastic if London Assembly did the same, or even on a more local level, your more local council? This is a campaign with which everyone here can get involved and do what we can to put the pressure on the UK government. The treaty is a positive and much needed development at a time when the prospect of nuclear war seems closer than it has for a generation. The election of Donald Trump in particular poses great dangers to world peace, considering his views on the US nuclear arsenal, nuclear proliferation and multilateral agreements. As we pull back from the nuclear brink one week, we veer closer to it the next. The US already has the capacity to destroy all life on Earth with its nuclear weapons system, but they published a new nuclear posture review last year which made nuclear war more likely, both by committing to a whole new generation of nuclear weapons, which they euphemistically call usable ones, and also by expanding the situations in which nuclear weapons can be used. And then we should all be seriously alarmed by Trump's pattern of the US disengaging from essential nuclear treaties. This has been discussed in length in the last session, but we really cannot underestimate how important it is to campaign to save the INF. It is because of the INF that many missiles were removed from Britain and across Europe, ensuring that neither superpower could conduct a nuclear war on our continent. So that makes sense that the UK government should be voicing strong opposition to the US withdrawing from this treaty. It should be using its influence to facilitate talks and negotiations instead. Many European leaders have already denounced the announcement, including Germany and France. CND is currently campaigning to defend the treaty on many fronts. We've already handed in thousands of our supporters' letters to the Foreign Office. We're planning a photo call outside Parliament. We're asking MPs to ask questions to challenge this in Parliament. We're taking out an advert in the national newspaper. We've launched an emergency petition, which our groups across the country are taking to street stalls in town centres. We are campaigning on many fronts, but we must do more. So in 2019, CND wants to make the case for a safer world, a world without nuclear weapons, louder than ever before. All of us here need to continue to speak and persuade people of our campaign. And sometimes I get people at local meetings forever saying, oh, sometimes I just feel like give up. Where are we going? What shall I do next? And what we try and say to them as CND campaigners is, well, do what's easy for you. You know, some people like to arrange protests, and that's easy in your area. But if that doesn't work, don't do it. Bruce mentioned earlier we could all be writing letters to newspapers. If we enjoy doing that, carry on doing it. If you don't, do the next thing. There are plenty of different ways that we can all in this room campaign. But altogether, our priorities are clear. We want to cancel Trident replacement, win government support for the ban treaty, while defending the current nuclear agreements that are in place. It is a dangerous and unstable time, but that's why we as campaigners are needed more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you.